Hello everyone, I am the Lore Explorer and this is Outer Wilds. Since the lead dev said that the upcoming DLC Echoes of the Eye has a focus on horror, I thought it would be fun to go through the base game and point out how that in some sense, Outer Wilds has always been a horror game to begin with. Sure, it may not be your classical sense of horror, but it can still strike fear into your heart, and it fits very well into the category of cosmic horror. As always, this video will contain spoilers for Outer Wilds. Now, classical horror is a pretty specific thing, so it's sort of odd to say that something isn't classical horror, yet still horror. Horror is something designed to scare the living crap out of you, most likely in the form of gratuitous visual dismemberment or well-timed jump scares. And Outer Wilds actually does have a pretty decent example of this with the anglerfish. When encountering these things for the first time, you can't help but to be frightened. They're 100 times bigger than your ship, and you can clearly see that they have evolved to be angry, and they serve a direct threat to you. This is pretty horrifying on its own, but anyone foolish enough to try to fly away from these things once they're already nearby is in for a second treat. Their initial fears were well placed. This thing is able to chase you down like a fish out of hell, and the screech they give off right as they're about to give chase would probably cause Reebok to poop their spacesuit. And of course, 90% of the time, this ends up you inside of this giant fish's stomach. This is all classic horror specifically created to frighten anyone who experiences it. You have your classic jump scare when they screech and give chase, and a big, scary, surprisingly fast fish with spikes sticking out of its side with the ability to eat your entire spaceship in one gulp. Yeah, I mean that's pretty horrifying to anybody. But to be honest, the entire game is filled up with its own sort of horror, what they call cosmic horror. The very fact that the universe is big and scary and anything could happen in it, and it sure as shrimps are small don't care about you. And we sort of even get hints at this before we even reach the launch site for the first time. We head up and get our launch codes, but on the way back out of the observatory, we get ambushed by a statue. Out of nowhere, a statue moves. It opens its eyes and begins to play our memories back to us like a projection. I think any reasonable person would be shaken to their core if a statue moved, let alone this happened to them. But what's really scary about all of this is we have no idea what's going on. Is someone trying to steal our memories for a nefarious purpose? Or is someone actually sitting there, watching our memories real time, everything I do on some random screen right now? Are they going to send someone to kill us now that we've awakened some ancient technology? There are just endless possibilities. Which is probably why a lot of people find spaceflight in and of itself scary. That's a form of horror on its own. A person whose flight coach is missing an eye has to get into a tiny spaceship all by themselves, strap themselves into a hunk of metal that was built by someone who has little care for quality assurance, and you have to blast yourself off into the vast emptiness of the vacuum of space using controlled explosions that are only 10 meters away from your head. There is just something inherently terrifying about that, which is why you have to be incredibly brave to be an astronaut. If just one of 1,000 potential things go wrong, you're lost to space forever, or worse, just straight up dead. And this isn't just some baseless fear in the game, I mean heck, just before we launch, we find out that the best pilot and astronaut in the whole group, Feldspar, has mysteriously gone missing for a very long time. Plus, taking the easiest flight to the closest body in the game reveals that spaceship crashes aren't a rare sight in the Outer Wilds Ventures lifestyle. Both of these astronauts would have been left for dead if it wasn't for their quick thinking and emergency supplies. But that is just sort of the passive horror present throughout the whole game. Even if you were to survive the whole loop, you're just met with another horrific event. Looking at the sun, we can see that it's swelled up to an extreme extent, and it's changed colors into a deep red. All we can do is sit here, helplessly, as the sun continues to expand past the interloper's orbit, and eventually it reaches its limits and collapses in on itself, going supernova. We can try to outrun it, but really, the simple fact is there is nothing we can do to prevent or mitigate this in any way. We watch as the sun explodes, slowly devours each and every planet, and there's nothing we can do about it except wait for it to kill everything. As if that wasn't horrifying enough, as soon as it does reach us, we don't just die. We die, but when we do, our memories appear before us again. Our memories play backward, and we seem to wake up as if we were at the beginning of our memories now. By now, we've probably worked out that this is a simple memory transfer through time via memory statues and masks. But you can't lie. Even simply using a projection pool and seeing the masks inside the Ash Twin projects is a pretty spine-chilling sight. You seem surrounded by these looming figures or powerful forces, and you sort of feel like they're watching you, which also seems present in the vicinity of the statues as well. And after our character looks into it long enough, we find out that we are stuck in a time loop. We eventually learn that we can't even remember all of these time loops, but this cycle has happened over 9 million times. The simple idea that we have died 9.3 million times and we are stuck in this time loop of mass death is just holistically scary when you think about it. Even if time is being rewritten and all of the Harthians and jellyfish and anglerfish, they all only technically die once, being trapped in the same 22 minutes is a scary thing that I don't think anyone would want to experience. Another example of something I personally wouldn't want to experience from this universe is quantum objects. End of sentence, full stop, just boom, done. In the game, they aren't really all that scary. They are mostly just rocks or trees that disappear and randomly appear somewhere else. But scary things can definitely arise from this phenomenon. And personally, I don't want any objects just showing up behind me, regardless of what it is. But just imagine if anglerfish were somehow quantized. When you're just flying through dark Bramble and an anglerfish just pops up behind you out of nowhere and hears your engines. And boom, all of a sudden you're dead. And hypothetical problems aren't the only problems with quantum objects. You also have to deal with the entanglement issue. If you stand on top of one of these quantum objects and stop observing it, you become entangled with it and become one with it. This transports you to an entirely separate random location that is one of its possibilities. Then, if you're unaware of what's going on, the object will disappear again, leaving you stranded there. One of the Nomai got trapped in a hollowed, entranceless area and almost died this way, but luckily, they worked everything out. Either way, the quantum objects definitely lean into the category of cosmic horror if you ask me, even if it's unintentionally. One of the best examples of how scary space can be is actually at the heart of one of the planets in the solar system. At the center of Brittle Hollow lay one of space's boogeymen, a black hole. Ideally, the way this is introduced to the player is after they've explored the surface and found the escape pod of the Nomai. Going through the escape pod leads us to an emergency exit which opens up right above an opening, which gives us a great view of the black hole down below. We open the door, watch it fall and bounce off of a few things before it disappears into that now obvious black hole. From there, the player has to traverse a series of bridges to get underneath the surface of the planet and explore. But these aren't the bridges you'd be hoping for. Made out of metal or thick stone with guardrails having been built for the ages, these are basically really thin 200,000-year-old stones that were built to be used once, right after construction, and never touched again. And this all paints a picture of the danger being presented abruptly and drastically with a black hole down below, and now we have to cross these really thin bridges. It really is something I could see in a sci-fi horror movie in which you open the door and someone in the group has a panic attack, and then when you're walking down the bridges, your best friend falls through right in front of you. It is genuinely frightening, and that's not even all that's scary with Brittle Hollow. Anytime we're on the surface, we have literally many tons of molten lava routinely raining down on us from the moon above. But I think randomly being crushed/cooked to death in an instant only raises to an honorable mention in the face of a black hole, since at the time of introduction, we have no real reason to believe that we would survive entering that black hole. This next one may not be so scary to most people, but it's actually my biggest fear. Being buried alive, just being immobile. Ember Twin paints a scenario in which you get lost in a deep, dark, windy cave system, and as you chase your tail and roam in circles trying to find the exit, the sand starts to fill up the room. Slowly, it raises as you start to panic and look at your map. You're nowhere near the entrance. You start heading up to avoid the sand level, but eventually it catches up to you. You try to take more steps, but your legs just sink into the sand, making it impossible for you to move, until eventually it either crushes you against the ceiling or you suffocate due to lack of oxygen. It may not be the scariest thing in the world, but in my eyes, this is freaking terrifying. It's grade A horror if you ask me. I also want to touch quickly on just the dark bramble plant itself. Yeah, there are a bunch of giant, deadly, scary freaking fish inside, but wait, how is there an inside? It's just a little unsettling that we can enter something that we could see all of, and it looks relatively small, but when we do enter it, we're suddenly transported to an area that's vast and full of fog. Without knowing what Dark Bramble is all about or how it works, it's easy to get trapped in the interdimensional maze that it really is. Dark Bramble literally has what we call the recursive node, which only leads us to itself. No matter how many times you try to go through the next seed, you'd always enter the same seed. You'd always be trapped there forever. Unless you turn around and go out, but who's gonna know that? For the rest of your life, you'd see nothing but endless vines, seeds, and fog. And maybe, if you're lucky, and you really want to kick up the horror, you get to see a snapshot into the world of a few dead people. That's always relaxing, right? But really, I'm surprised I got this far without even mentioning the space-time ending. I guess we really don't know about it while playing to be scared about it until it happens, but when it does, holy crap is it scary. There's this big boom, and time literally shatters, starting with whatever mistake you made. Then, the entire universe just ceases to be. We effectively murdered every living thing in the universe. Like, it'd be scary enough to have something happen to end the universe, but to actually have caused it by accident? That's really letting you know the universe and the machinations to be don't care about you in the slightest. That's like saying, remember that time you played with a fancy machine at the science center and broke it? Well, it blew up the universe. Congratulations. It just fits so well into that narrative of cosmic horror, but not as well as the end of the game, or the last loop really. In the last loop, we have to come to the realization that there is nothing we can do to stop this supernova. We have to shut off the time loop and let the sun blow up one last time. Yeah, it'll kill everyone we know and love, but it's really inevitable in the end. Ultimately, we have no choice. The universe has just put us into this position where there were no good options. And that leads you to the ultimate example of cosmic horror, the eye of the universe. What has been described to us as the cause of all uncertainty in the universe. It's pretty hard to explain, but as soon as you get there, something just feels off. It almost feels either like you shouldn't be able to get there, or whatever this thing is shouldn't be here to begin with. It's calling out with some quantum signal and it almost sounds like a chant. It's surrounded by a seemingly never-ending field of smoke that's all streaming towards the center, and there's a weird symbol embedded in the smoke. One of the descriptors of cosmic horror is something being scary because it's incomprehensible, and I think this fits that really well. And that continues on with the rest of the ending. All of this is so unsettling because it's something that we can't really understand. There's no explanation to how touching this weird smoke transports us to the museum we are familiar with. Which is definitely a nice place to teleport us, but we have no way to know that we aren't going to be teleported somewhere terrible next. Or if we're going to run out of oxygen in this place. And we do run into a few unsettling things while in the eye. It's not exactly horror, but we meet what seems to be a copy of ourselves. Plus, we do get teleported to the Big Bang and sort of blow up with it, which isn't ideal for anybody. But mostly, that ending is just unsettling because you're not sure what the heck's going on or what you're interacting with or if you'll be safe when it's over. And I think the developers did a great job at putting all of this together. Aside from anglerfish, I'm not sure any single one of these examples were designed to scare you like classical horror is. But the developers were definitely still able to put fear into your heart. There were many times where my fists were clenched tight to the controller because I was so nervous or scared, or where I was left speechless, just trying to take in what I'm seeing or reading. I think Echoes of the Eye is going to lean more into the classical horror a bit, but I think it will feel right at home in this universe, since it never really was a universe in which you were always safe. You always were in danger of crashing or suffocating or sand or a supernova or falling, but maybe now it'll just be a little more jump scary or direct. However they decide to implement it doesn't really matter to me. I'm just excited to be getting more Outer Wilds sometime soon. I know my opinion isn't all that important, but I hope this at least put it into context for some people who thought, oh no, a horror game, that doesn't sound right. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. And of course, a special thanks to the members here on the channel. I really appreciate all the support. As always, this is a lore explorer, just excited for Echoes of the Eye. I hope to see you all in the next video, and thanks for watching.